The courtroom was silent until Officer Daniels walked in. His smug expression told everyone he didn't think much of the judge he was about to face. He had been called in for a disciplinary hearing, but as soon as he saw Judge Carter, a highly respected black judge, his demeanor shifted. His tone turned condescending, his words laced with subtle jabs, as if he didn't believe she belonged on the bench. The tension in the room thickened. Whispers spread through the gallery as people exchanged uneasy glances. But Judge Carter remained calm, her expression unreadable. She let him speak, allowing the weight of his own words to hang in the air. Then, just as Officer Daniels thought he had the upper hand, something happened that no one expected. The courtroom's reaction left him stunned, forcing him to confront a truth he never saw coming. Stay tuned to see how justice plays out. Officer Daniels shifted in his seat, his confidence flickering for the first time. The courtroom, once his domain as an enforcer of the law, now felt different, unfamiliar. Judge Carter remained composed, scanning the file in front of her. Her silence was heavy, pressing down on him in a way he hadn't expected. People in the gallery watched closely, some leaning forward, sensing that something bigger was unfolding. Whispers filled the air, stories of Officer Daniels' past, accusations that had been brushed aside. He had always walked away without consequences, but today he wasn't the one in control. The prosecutor stood, clearing his throat. "Officer Daniels, let's talk about the incident that brought you here today." Daniels smirked, but it was weaker now. He glanced at Judge Carter, expecting indifference. Instead, he saw something else, something that made his throat go dry. She knew more than he thought. The room felt colder now. Officer Daniels adjusted his collar, trying to maintain his usual bravado, but something about Judge Carter's gaze unsettled him. She wasn't just reading from a file, she was reading him. The prosecutor continued, laying out the details of the case. A routine traffic stop gone wrong. A young black man, terrified and humiliated, recorded the entire encounter. The video had gone viral. Daniels had laughed it off at first, calling it just another misunderstanding. But now, sitting under the courtroom's bright lights, he wasn't so sure. In the gallery, the young man's mother sat with her hands clasped tightly. Her eyes never left Daniels. He avoided her gaze. A few officers sat in the back, watching silently, their expressions unreadable. Some had worked with Daniels for years. Others had seen the video too. Judge Carter tapped her pen lightly on the desk. "Officer Daniels, do you believe your actions were justified?" The question lingered, filling the room with a heavy pause. For the first time, Daniels hesitated. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came out. The weight of the courtroom pressed down on him, every eye locked onto his next move. Judge Carter's expression remained steady, waiting. The silence stretched, making his pulse quicken. He had been in countless courtrooms before, but never like this. Never on the other side. The prosecutor stepped forward, his voice firm. "Let me remind you, Officer Daniels, the video speaks for itself. The language you used, the way you handled that young man, would you say that was standard procedure?" Daniels shifted in his seat, forcing a smirk. "Things get tense out there. People don't always listen." A murmur ran through the crowd. The young man's mother inhaled sharply, her hands tightening in her lap. Judge Carter leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp. "And do you believe that justifies your words and actions?" Daniel's jaw tensed. He wanted to argue, to push back. But the truth was catching up with him. The air in the room was charged, the walls closing in. He could feel it. Something was coming. Something he wasn't prepared for. Daniels clenched his fists under the table. He had handled interrogations before, but this was different. He wasn't the one asking the questions. He was the one being judged. The air in the courtroom felt thick, charged with something unspoken. Judge Carter exhaled slowly, then slid another document across the bench. "Officer Daniels, this isn't the first complaint against you." A hush fell over the room. Daniels' smirk vanished. The prosecutor picked up where she left off. Multiple reports, unlawful stops, excessive force, all dismissed, until now. She turned to the gallery. And thanks to new evidence, this case isn't just about one incident anymore. Daniels stiffened. New evidence? His mind raced. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. A door at the back of the courtroom creaked open. The young man from the video stepped inside, his presence sending a ripple through the crowd. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He had something to say. And Daniels knew. Whatever came next could change everything. The young man stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Daniels. The tension in the room peaked. He took a slow breath before speaking. "I know you remember me," he said, his voice steady. "But what you don't know is, I wasn't alone that night." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Daniels sat rigid, his face paling. Judge Carter raised an eyebrow. "Go on." The young man reached into his pocket and handed a flash drive to the prosecutor. "That night, my brother was on a video call with me. He recorded everything, from the moment I saw the flashing lights to the moment I drove away." Daniel's stomach dropped. Another recording, one he didn't know about. The prosecutor plugged in the drive. The screen flickered to life, showing the grainy but clear angle, his face, his words, his actions. But then, something unexpected. A voice in the background. A fellow officer, laughing, saying, "Asterisk, he won't report it. They never do. Asterisk." Gasps filled the courtroom. Daniels turned to the back, where the officers sat. One of them shifted uncomfortably. Judge Carter let the silence sink in before speaking. "It seems this case is bigger than just you, Officer Daniels." Daniels swallowed hard. He had thought this was just another hearing. But now, it was unraveling into something much bigger. And for the first time he realized he wasn't the only one being judged today. The courtroom was silent, but the weight of the moment was deafening. Officer Daniels sat frozen, his usual arrogance replaced with something else, fear. Judge Carter glanced toward the prosecutor, then at the young man standing tall in the center of the room. "This changes everything," she said firmly. The prosecutor nodded. "With this new evidence, we will conduct a full investigation, not just into Officer Daniels, but into the culture that allowed this to continue." A murmur of agreement swept through the gallery. The young man's mother wiped away tears, gripping her son's hand. For the first time since that night, he felt heard. Daniels lowered his gaze, knowing his days of walking away unscathed were over. The truth had finally caught up with him. As Judge Carter banged the gavel, the message was clear. Accountability had arrived. And for everyone watching, this was more than just a verdict. It was a turning point.